Welcome to another episode of the Crossroads podcast. My name is Bogdan Pavel, and I'm the host of the podcast and very happy to welcome you again for another episode. Today with me, with great pleasure, I have Maria Chiara. Hello, Maria Chiara, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
Such a pleasure to have this opportunity to spend some time together today and talk about Crossroads. As you know, the script is always the same. I have asked Maria Chiara to think about a crossroads moment from her life, be it personal, professional, or anything else that perhaps inspired her in her journey. By crossroad, of course, we look at all sorts of moments that brought perhaps challenges, opportunities, moments of change that, in any case, I believe in life have the potential to bring growth or a new perspective as to how our life is, as to how we look at things. So I'm really glad to hear very soon from Maria Chiara about her crossroad. But perhaps before, just a very short introduction from your side, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, so thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I'm very honored. And it's my first podcast, so I'm even more honored to take part in this.
Great.
So I'm Maria Chiara. I'm an Italian national that has been living in Belgium since 6, 7 years. I'm working in public affairs, and right now I'm actually working for a Belgian agency that is dealing with cybersecurity. So I started to study political science, and then I moved towards public affairs, and now to government affairs, let's say. So this is a little bit who am I.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, without further ado, I would also hand over it back to you.
So my crossroad, I hinted it a little bit in the in my introduction. So I'm as I was saying, I'm Italian national, but I was always very keen to study foreign languages, and then when it ended up to university, I decided that I was interested in political science and then to international relations. And my crossroad, I think that was not even one that I realized fully when I was there, was the first time that I actually came to Brussels. The funny story is that I was supposed to come to Brussels for an Erasmus, and I decided not to come because I didn't feel that I was prepared enough, that I was ready enough to take this challenge. And then it happened that few years later, I was selected for a program that brought me here for 1 year. And I remember that when I was leaving, I was really thinking that it was just 1 year, then I will come back to Italy and live my life in Italy as I was supposed to do. And what was even more interesting is that my father already knew even before me, because he kept on saying to me that he always remembered the day that I took my flight, and he knew that in any case I would have changed, and he would have not bring me back. And yeah, so the crossroad was a little bit this, like the dreaming in your room while little of the possibilities of living abroad and the chances to follow your dreams, and then at a certain moment you find yourself in your dream. And life is not always a dream, so you have moments in which then you ask yourself why. And usually what I've always thought and I've always said is that when you're like a person that takes the decision of putting him or herself into questions, you know, like you leave your family, you leave your house, you leave your part of your identity in a way, you know. And the kind of questions that then you start to ask yourself are more and more difficult to reply to, because if you are a person like me, where I am the first one in my family to actually take this decision, it meant that I also had difficulties in asking for guidance to people that were senior than me, or like my parents or whoever, because they didn't know what I was facing, you know. And then it becomes always a question on what if I never lived? Maybe I'm not meant to be here, you know. It's always like a very existential questions that at a certain moment come to into place. And this is also why I think that it's a real crossroad, because it's as if every time that you have a difficult moment, you are always asking yourself, maybe that day I should have not left, maybe that day I should have actually understand that my place was in another place, or you know, it's a little bit like this and blurred. And I must admit that it's something that I still question myself, even now that I'm more settled, that I know a little bit what I want, because you never know what you want in life, I think. But I just came back from Italy yesterday, and you know, it's like the little thought that you have in mind, that you're like, what if? I also realized that thanks to you, I had the opportunity to think about it, because sometimes, and I think that, I don't know if it's something that also other guests will say or not, is that when you live your life, you actually don't ask yourself too many questions, or at least this is my experience. And I actually was realizing that when I left, I didn't realize that I was leaving for good, you know. And I remember especially the first years where, you know, money were short, or the like being alone was not always easy. I was always treasuring the idea of saying, okay, maybe I go back. But then it kicks on all the issues of, what if I go back? What other people would think if I go back? Does it mean that I failed? I failed first and foremost with me, with my dream, you know, of making it abroad. And yeah, so this is a little bit, but I don't want to take too much time in. And I leave it to you if you want to ask a follow-up question.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I'm smiling because, yeah, I can see myself in many of the aspects that you mentioned. I think we often realize what identity is, and how it can become more and more blurred. I think the more we change the places where we live, or also where we fantasize to live, because sometimes, as you said, you hadn't even left the physical place, but you were with your mind maybe living or dreaming to leave a place. So I can only imagine how this was the important crossroad for you. And I think this is why I also like the metaphor of the traffic crossroad, because it's indeed like this, finding ourselves in a situation which we have multiple choices and options offered to us. Sometimes it's a bit of, let's say, the burden of having too many choices, which it's a paradox because per se should be such a positive, or has such a positive potential, because we are faced with options we can choose from, but sometimes indeed this also bears the question of the what if I had chosen another street, and so on. So looking backwards, sometimes this question can still haunt us, but I think on the other hand, this question maybe also can bring us some courage or some appreciation of how brave we were at some point, just going for it without even knowing how this might end. So thank you so much for bringing up all these topics. As you said, I'm happy actually you mentioned this, that this was a useful maybe thinking exercise for you to think about structuring a crossroad, but I think it's really very useful for me as well, especially as we have a few common elements definitely from our life, at least in the recent years. I would like to go perhaps one step backward, as you mentioned that since a little girl, or in your early years in any case, you were thinking about this, about the idea of moving abroad. I wanted to ask you, how did it feel in that moment, this dream? How did you imagine it? Also, not having any guidance, as you said.
Yeah. So when, of course, like when you're little, like you think at your life like as a movie, as a cartoon, like where everything falls into places, but then the reality sometimes is more difficult. I remember that for me, one of the most difficult part was finding a house, for instance, and the idea of having to look at it on my own, because my parents were like, we don't speak the language, we never actually went abroad, so how can we actually help you? And I was already like, I think I was 22, 23 when I moved to Brussels for the first time. So I was not a little lady, but for me was everything new, because I maybe it's a little bit embarrassing, but I live all my previous years of university still at home with my parents. So even at university, it was not like a matter of looking at like finding a house, trying colocation or something like this. And like at the beginning, it was more like getting into also the practicalities of life that before I didn't really experience, because possibly another part that needs to be said is that of course, compared to other people, I lived a very comfortable life, in which before moving, I didn't really had so much difficulties. I was always in a way, how to say, caressed, or like shielded. This is what my dad was always saying, that I was almost like a sleeping beauty, because I was coming from a small town close to Rome, where basically I could go by walk, and I was like living really like the fairy tale life, and then boom, eventually I find myself abroad, and I need to look at everything and myself, and knowing that as much as I can ask, the support that I can have from my family is very limited, and is limited because of them not speaking the languages, them wanting me to grow up, and at the same time difficulties in also, like, because at a certain moment you need to be responsible for yourself. You cannot always ask for support, and So yes, I would tend to say that this is the discrepancy, like the fairy tale, because in your dreams everything goes smoothly, and then the reality of life is sometimes more difficult. Like it can be from the university administration not recognizing your name because it's not written in the way that it should be written. So then having to go to the consulate to try to solve it, up to realize that you need to register yourself because you are actually living abroad, and then receiving, for instance, for the first time ever, like the document of taxes, that even if I didn't have to pay, I was really shocked because I was like, oh my God, what is this? What I should do? And I know that if I would have been in Italy, it would have been a thing that I would say, Mom, Dad, I received this. What should I do? And they would be like, don't worry, we will take care. And in that moment, I was like, okay, first of all, I need to step up with my French to try to try to understand, sorry, and read what it was written on. And then also understand what, legally speaking, it was written there. And then last thing that I wanted to say, but I was thinking about it when what we were saying before, is that it's true that sometimes we don't realize how brave a decision like this can be, and how not common it is. Because another part that I would like to maybe underline is that is also how much then you confront yourself to others. And I remember, especially when I moved to Poland, where it was very much more of a multicultural setting. I remember that the first feeling that I had was really to not feel brave enough at all, because I was barely speaking 4 languages compared to people that were like fluent in 5, 7, or 8. People coming from amazing experience or amazing backgrounds, and I remember that period in time humbled me very, very much, because I remember that after my first crossroad, as we would say, I was feeling like going back home, where everybody was like, oh my God, you live 1 year abroad and you face this and you face that. And I was like, yeah, it's true. And I was like, this is amazing. And then suddenly I find myself with 120 people that were like way surpassing me in terms of, as I said, languages, experiences, and everything. And I was like, okay, I'm just again a little girl from Monterotondo that finds herself in a place where maybe should not be there or not, So it's true. I think that you have always to put everything in perspective, and at the same time, what I say to myself every time, especially when I have hard times, is recognize how much I have achieved and be kind to myself, because if you're not kind to yourself, nobody else will be kind.
And thank you so much, first of all, for all this reflection, which I think it's very good, because you're not only limiting yourself at a specific event, but you're also identifying some other elements in other episodes, which you mentioned, referring also to your period in Poland, but also to your period in Brussels at 2 times, let's say, during your studies and then afterwards. I wanted to ask you, when do you think you gathered the courage and then, let's say, self-love, perhaps in some instances also, to consider it a crossroad and to then actually get the understanding that this is something you can be really proud of, and that it was indeed a choice that you had made for your life, and at least for the moment it is a choice that you're sticking with, and you're happily
Yeah.
living in another country. And so when did you understand that these were all things that actually you did yourself, and it was something to be happy about, instead of, let's say, staying a bit within your shell and maybe comparing yourself too much with others, or feeling still like, well, I had a comfortable life where I was helped in once and once again. When would you say this happened? And if I may also just on this, was it, you think, also related to a specific event, perhaps a specific person, or was just perhaps just a series of events?
Yeah. So I I really so I would tend to say it's it's not blur, but like it's a series of events that eventually made me arrive to the idea that I have right now, that this is the place that I want to be, at least in the medium long term, as I say. But so the first thought was that after my experience in Poland, because as I said, my first year, like my first travel to Brussels, I was like, I still don't know. Maybe I will go back. I will find a job in Rome. Like while I was here, I started to realize that I didn't necessarily want to go back, but I didn't want to stay in Brussels because I didn't really enjoy that year here. And this is why I went to Poland. And then while I was in Poland, maybe there was yet another crossroad for I really finished my studies back then, and I had to really take a decision of what I wanted to do with my life. The period in which I could rely on the support of my parents was coming to an end, and in that moment specifically, I realized that I didn't want to look for a job in Italy for numerous decisions, not numerous decisions, but for numerous considerations. There is not just the fact of how hard is the job market in Italy, but it was like even broader than that, because I felt that I was changed in a way that I would have not been completely satisfied if I would have gone back to Italy. And in that moment, my other crossroad was like, what do I do? It's the path that I thought I was taking, which was European affairs, public affairs, is not actually welcoming me, because the harsh life, again, as I was saying, was that I was not succeeding in some of the application that I was having, and I remembered that in the midst of complete chaos, I applied for a position in Vietnam to teach English. So it was like, what should I do? And eventually, I was able to find a job that would allow me to go back to Brussels, and little by little, I started to realize that this was my place. And at the beginning, I really thought that it was because of the friends that I had here, that this was my city, because I was able to create a second family here, going out a lot with them and living like the kind of teenager years that I didn't have before. But then I think that, and going directly to the question that you were saying, is that more than a person that actually made me realize that I wanted to stay here, it was like the fact that all my friends started to leave. And by the time that all of my like close friends that started to leave left, I was thinking, okay, where should I go? People were like following their own dreams, their own professional dreams or personal dreams. You know, like it seems that everybody else had their life figured out, and I was yet not sure. And at the beginning, I really thought that it was me being sort of not shy, but lazy to stay here, until the moment in which I was like, and this I think it was especially during COVID times, that I was like, okay, now you're alone for real, because all my friends left, or you cannot see them as much as before. I could have easily go back and say, okay, I maybe go back to Italy and then see what the future might bring. But then in that moment, I started to realize that actually this was the city in which I grew. This is the city that I feel like home. And this is the city in which, paradoxically speaking, I feel part of something. Yeah, so it was more the lack of security net and a lot of time alone that made me realize that I wanted to stay here, and I wanted to actually grow even more here. And if I may, like last thing is that I also think that this was easy for me to realize because of how much also I built in the time being. While like from a professional point of view to other kind of contacts that I have. So I'm not completely alone by what I was saying, but it's more a matter of feeling part of something, even if it's very difficult to say that Brussels is something because of what we know at the peculiarity of the city.
Thank you so much. And actually, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned several times the concept of growth. How at first you thought it was necessary to grow, perhaps from the familiar situation that you knew back home, to then actually experiencing growth, perhaps different nuances of this growth. I wanted to ask your personal opinion on growth. What is the most important, perhaps, aspect of it that you are happy of having gained, and perhaps also what element of growth did Crossroad bring upon?
So I think that the two issues are very much connected. So the crossroad and the growth. Why? Because so the idea for me living in the first place was because I was, before comparing myself to others, like with the capital O, I was comparing myself with members of my family. So both my parents left their respective households fairly young, in their early, not even early 20s. Yeah, like around 20 or 21. And similarly, my brother. So imagine how difficult it was for me to realize that I was 22, 23, as I was saying before, and yet still at home. So I really thought that in order to grow, I needed to leave. And this is why I think that, considering that the crossroad for me was really like physically leaving a country, for me, I think that growth came little by little. I think that when I arrived to Brussels, when I was in Poland, when I came back to Brussels, like in both those experiences, I was very, very mature. Especially from the social point of view, from being able to hang out with people from with different nationalities. Sometimes, you look in jobs application, ability to work in a multicultural setting, and you don't always realize how that is actually a soft skill, because you really need to find yourself with other people to understand that sometimes there's just like things that are different from culture to culture. And this is why I was saying that for me, like, living alone was also a source for me to also grow. And then the other difficulty for me was also to experience the loneliness alone that made me grow as well. So I decided to always live on my own, because I thought that it would have been easier for me, while not acknowledging at the first in the first step how difficult it would have been as well. So I really, really think that if I'm the person that I'm right now, is also thanks, and because maybe I will not sound very humble when I say this, but I think that right now I really matured. And I think that I really matured because I was able to face all my difficulties, demons, and problematics on my own, which is difficult, but it's so enriching in terms of then knowing yourself. Because then I think, and then when you are asking me what is my definition of growth, for me, growing is not just like the wrinkles that you can have or how physiologically you can change. It's really like how much you get to know yourself. Like, the more you know yourself, the more old you are. And I think that for me, what helped me and how the crossroad helped me was to put myself in very difficult situation that led me to understand how Maria Chiara functions, and it's a sort of almost empirical kind of a situation. So by errors, you start to, okay, I see that if I do this, I react in a certain way. So how should I get better at? When I left, I didn't realize how immature I was. And I remember that my father said to me, "You will not come back for the first 3 months of your stay in Brussels." And I was like, "Why?" And he was like, no, you need to really know how to be with yourself, do everything on your own. And I remember that those were like the three more, like the most difficult moment of my life, because I remember that they were the first Sundays sorry, to be alone. the first Sundays in which I needed to find something to do that was different from just studying. And I remember that when I went then back for Christmas, I asked my father why he did that, and he was like, because if I would have give you the opportunity to come back, possibly you would have not go back to Brazil. I don't know if that would have been the case. I just know that possibly that was a smart move. And it also shows how much of a good girl I was, because I follow what my parents were saying. But yeah.
And I think that was it proved to be a good advice, as at least it definitely guided you or showed you that Brussels could have been a place for you as you're still there quite a few years later. Maria Chiara, you mentioned a few elements that were very interesting for me here, such as the fact of growth being a moment, of course, in which you really also know yourself, get to know yourself better. You mentioned the fact that sometimes the only way of learning is also by a trial by error, which I think is very, very important as a message. How doing mistakes ultimately is the only way of trying and therefore learning. I would like to ask you also to complete these elements. I think success sometimes it's also an element that is very important, and that we, especially if by nature one tends to be a bit humble, we forget to celebrate, let's say, our own successes. So Crossroads, I think they are not only about challenges, and because I think we by nature can be very good at realizing what were the difficult moments and how we could have done better. But I think it's also important to realize that at the end of at the other side of the crossroad, there's also the importance of recognizing one's successes and right choices, or courage to do a certain choice. I would like to ask you to conclude what is the thing that you are most proud of on the other side of this crossroad?
Almost the thing that I'm most proud of is that of the person that I've become. I think, yes, as simple as that. And maybe if I can add something to what you were saying before, is that sometimes we get lost, as you were saying, in the negative side, or the negative look more at those. But I really think that regardless of the title, regardless of the money, regardless of the success that are the ones that make the headlines, or the success as judged by the majority of people, I think that what I'm mostly proud of is as simple as I said, the person that I've become, and of the people that I have around, and the love that I get. I know that it's maybe not the sorry again, the fanciest, but even in difficult times, and in moments in which you lose people, I think that the most enriching experience is to know that people are proud of me, and people keep on loving me.
Thank you so much, Maria Chiara.